I'd like to call to order the May 6th, 2021 Plan Commission meeting. Could I get a roll call, please?
I think I did something here.
Oh, it's simple.
Still do a roll call, don't we?
Well, sorry, wasn't thinking.
Okay, let me get this set up here. I wasn't ready, I guess.
You're muted.
Oh, and I have to turn that on.
Make sure
Okay.
everybody can hear.
Okay.
Well, yes,
Everyone on
let's Cinco de Mayo.
Teams, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Can we get a roll call?
Yes. Kays,
Yes. Here.
Brink,
Here.
Aletsky,
Present.
Dargits Johnson,
Here.
Culhane,
Here.
and then Ford, Dolly, and then Spire and Hanson as the alternates are absent. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is invitation for public comment participant submittal. If there's anything not on the agenda that someone from the public would like to talk about, there will be time later in the meeting for that, and just please let someone on the city staff know that you have an item to talk about. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We are going to make a couple of changes. We're going to rearrange the order of the regular agenda, item 6. We're going to move letter D up to letter A. Item C, we're going to move up to item B. What's currently item A is going to move to item C, and what's currently item B will move to item D. All right, with that, can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Can I get a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. It's been a while since we've done a roll call vote. Forgot how to do it. All right, item 5 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the April 22nd meeting. Can I get a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Item 6 is the regular agenda. The new 6A is commission consideration of resolution 2021-20 approving the replat of Lot 1, Watertown Railroad 2nd Edition. Brandy, could you take over, please?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So this property here, it is a replat of Lot 1, Watertown Railroad 2nd Edition. It was previously administratively platted in December 28th of 2020. It was just all one lot. This is Bogue Avenue property here. The city does retain this detention pond, but then this property now is owned by Wolford Properties. And so what they're wanting to do is replat it into the 5 lots and just subdivide it that way. This, again, could be administratively platted, but we do have a caveat in the ordinance that you cannot do 2 minor plats or replats within 3 years. So that's why it's before you today. Bert Magstead with Utilities confirmed that the easements are good as far as where Utilities has their infrastructure, and the lots themselves are conforming, and they are zoned R3 multifamily residential. So, you know, some of them are smaller, and that will just limit what they can actually, how many like units they could have if they did apartments or whatnot. This lot 5A will be difficult. I mean, it really doesn't have a buildable area. I would imagine that would end up being a parking lot or something similar, because there's a very large storm sewer pipe that runs underneath within this easement here. So all just things that we would look at when they would come forward for a building permit application. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Why is it labeled 1A, 2A, 3A, and not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Is there a reason for that?
I mean, that's a good
Is it because
point.
the original lot was 1?
It was just lot 1. So,
They're using the A to jump from 1A, and then we're subdividing, so you're keeping the A consistent. I'm
but
guessing.
A wasn't even a part of it. It was just lot 1.
But I can't rename this lot one.
Okay.
There's no one. Is there no one on here?
1A, because
Yeah. So
it
I
was-
can't go lot 1 again, so I have to go 1A, and so I suppose for consistency's sake, you went with a numbering system just following the A's.
yeah, we'll go with that.
No issues from staff, water, sewer. And we're thinking it more likely would be for a multiple family type dwelling, twin homes, apartments, that sort of thing?
I would imagine just because of it's a narrow property, so I would imagine row housing of some sort.
I'm assuming it'll be like them fourplexes that are along the old railroad tracks by 4th Avenue and Highway 20.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 6B, Commission consideration of Resolution 2021-19, an amendment to Chapter 2406 of the ordinance. Brandy, could you take it away, please?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So if you guys remember, we just recently also updated our subdivision procedure ordinance. That was a large undertaking that we spent a lot of time on, and that became effective on January 1st of this year. And just with a new ordinance, ordinances all together, they are a living, breathing document. So we did notice something that was omitted by mistake, and that it is an important it's an important requirement that we want to include within that this portion of the ordinance. So we added it back. So this language here: approximate groundwater and lowest finished floor elevation shall be shown for buildings. The lowest recommended floor elevation shall be 2 feet above the normal groundwater elevation. Test holes shall determine groundwater elevation where applicable. That is underneath the preliminary plan, and if you guys remember, we restructured it, the whole procedure, the process, where the concept plan comes to the Plan Commission, and then the preliminary plan is approved by the design review team and staff administratively. So this is when they'd be getting into a little more of the technical detail. They should know this information anyway when they're designing, and this is an important aspect for a buyer beware of, just making sure that we know where the water table is, so that somebody isn't having some pump running 24/7 or drainage issues like that.
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt, but also the minimum floor helps with the city with our insurance rating through FEMA. So requiring a finished floor 2 feet above the high water mark helps the whole town.
Well, and actually, so that portion is covered. So our for the drainage plan, you can see here that what we did is we used to have a large list of requirements, but then we just referenced the requirements back to the actual post-construction stormwater BMP manual, so that we had consistency there, because they have to design to the manual and then meet those requirements as well. So we just, instead of recreating it, we just wanted consistency. And so it does actually, in that list, it does talk about showing that lowest finished floor on there. This one is just, we're just adding to it, basically.
So this would only apply to new subdivisions moving forward. Would it apply to a replat situation that we just went through here today, where we have one lot that's being replatted into 5 lots? Would this standard be applied to that development?
No, this would be subdivision exempt.
Okay.
So there's a portion, in Chapter 24 that it allows, there are certain there's certain allowances that you can be subdivision exempt. You don't have to go through the process of a concept plan, prelim plan, all of that. And that's if there are not any public improvements or right-of-way dedication. And there's a whole list there of all the things, you're not landlocking a parcel by doing a plat. You're not platting more than 5 lots.
If I was to raise 2 blocks or 3 blocks because a tornado went through town and ended up replatting 3 new blocks into something completely different, which met the lot threshold, with this application then apply to that?
Well, that's there's a lot of, maybe.
I mean, I'm just, if somebody wanted to go to the southwest part of Washington, we had a flood, and we decided that we were going to, take out 4 or 5 city blocks, and we're going to redo something with that and come up with a new conceptual design, construction plan. The groundwater table would be a requirement of
Yes.
the new construction.
Yeah. Redevelopment, infill development, it all just would depend on what application it was.
Okay.
So I'm really going to be stupid here. So is this done just when a new development's brought in?
For the most part.
So how do you know, I mean, water is different levels on the parcels. How do you go about
And
hitting
And that is where year to year it could change, but it's just to have the best available information while they're designing. And when I say, like what Todd had brought up, like this, you could have to go through the whole subdivision process, even if it's an existing, it's a redevelopment of a piece of property.
But one property, I mean, my house sits here and the next one sits here and the water table's higher at one. I mean, every time you put a house, are you drilling to check that? Is that what you're doing?
We actually, that's something that we're looking at potentially adding into our Title V for building requirements. But this would just be for the subdivision, the plans themselves, the preliminary plan. And then, so that's where it is difficult, because really you would want, before you would, like when somebody would buy an individual lot, they should really do another test hole to know exactly where the groundwater is. But this at least gives them a good starting point.
So when I'm developing this preliminary plan and I've got a 20 lot development, I'm punching 20 holes in each one of those lots, or I'm only doing at the corners and one in the middle, or where am I doing that at?
Where applicable.
I feel as though it would be a lot up to the engineer of record when they were designing that to get a good estimate, something that they feel very comfortable with. It wouldn't necessarily be on a per lot basis, but it would have to be enough where they would feel comfortable providing that data and stamping those plans. If there are concerns that are identified, there absolutely need to be a test hole dug at every single location prior to a building permit. And we may look at amending Chapter 5, which is the building chapter, a little bit later as well. But this would be just getting that data and assuming that it's that there were enough test holes drilled to be reasonably accurate. And then hopefully with getting this information, it can help the contractors know what type of a home could be built there kind of earlier in the process at that preliminary phase, rather than designing something with a full basement and then finding out that they're in a high water table area.
If I have water table elevation currently at 2.5 or 3 feet below the earth's surface, and I decide that I want to have more opportunities to have flexibility in my design, I would have the ability to bring fill in to raise above that groundwater elevation, and then that would help you in your grading plan reviews and things like that.
Potentially, so
Yeah.
long as it did not interfere with like the overall subdivision grading design. So that's a potential, but there would still need to be a look to make sure that the addition of fill would not negatively impact the entire over lot grading design.
And just to clarify too, that this requirement was always a part of the subdivision process. It was just omitted by mistake when we were making the amendments to the entirety. So it's important and very helpful, and so we definitely want to see that added back in. And then same with, I didn't finish there, but the construction plan portion too, we're adding it back in there where the lowest recommended floor elevation shall be 2 feet above the normal groundwater elevation. So just adding in a couple places throughout this chapter.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I will open the public hearing, so if there's anyone that wants to speak in favor or against this change.
So just for me to clarify, so we have a development and I pick lot 2. I don't have to go and have that core. I just say I want a full basement house dug or is a core sample taken or water, is it drilled every time?
So we would look back at your individual lot. We would look at that against the preliminary plan. And if you were wanting to do something that was lower than what was recommended, because they show all of the, a footprint of the house and then the lowest finished floor elevation. And so if you wanted to do a basement, we would say we need to see a test hole and then confirm at that time if you were able to. And then also, like Stacy had alluded to, that if it was something that was changing, like drastically changing the grading plan on the approved preliminary plan, that's something that we'd have to look into as well.
But what she's asking for isn't really part of this ordinance. That would be, that's something else when you're talking about.
That's a building permit. Yeah, when I'm coming for you with my building permit,
Right.
yeah.
That's
So-
not part of this proposed change.
And that is where that will be if we come forward with Title V. It's just we have to think about that a little bit more. So that might be something that would come forward, and that would actually just go to City Council. I could see us bringing it though for informational purposes because it's Title V. Right. So it wouldn't technically be something that the Plan Commission oversees, but it is very directly related to things that we look at. So it would probably be something we'd bounce off you for ideas before going forward.
And right now, when we get a preliminary plan, they have lowest floor elevations on them. So it's not changing anything that we're used to. And so to go back to the, when we look at the preliminary plan, it says, lowest floor elevation 1760. So then when someone buys a property, they know that their lowest floor is already 1760. They don't have to do the boring themselves. That's already determined by the developer. Once the homeowner buys it, they're ready to go. They're ready to build. They're ready to get the building permit from city staff. So this isn't putting a burden on the homeowner at all. Yeah. It's just
the homeowner needs to do due diligence to ask how deep can I go.
Right. Which they've always had to. We just changed the ordinance and this didn't get carried over. So
I guess the reason I'm asking is just northeast part of town. You find that those sub pumps run a lot, and that's the. Yeah, that's just where I'm inquiring on that. If this was in place at that point, then I'm kind of surprised that we have those issues, that's all.
Right.
But wasn't that development in the early 80s when they brought that in? Really?
Hearing no comments from the public, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion and a second from the board for discussion.
So moved.
I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 6C on the agenda is commission consideration of resolution 2020-17, an amendment to chapter 2190. Brandy, could you take over?
Yes, and actually, let's see who just popped on here. No. So I think it'd be nice to have Councilman Hoyer here. I know that he wanted to participate in this discussion. So could we postpone this item and go to the kennels? Is that allowable, Matt? Because we already said, we.
I think I'd need to make a motion for tabling it.
We'll still talk about it at this meeting.
Yeah, tabling is appropriate when you're going to pick it back up during a meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Make a motion to table item C, and move on to D.
Got a motion to table? Do I have a second?
Sure.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, item 6C is tabled. Let's move on to item 6D. Commission consideration of resolution 2021-18, amendments to chapter 21.12 and others. Brandy, please take over.
Thank you, Jeff. So this is a kennel ordinance amendment. And so it is basically all we're doing in Title 21. And Matt has been working on this one, so I will let him explain. I'm just giving a brief overview as far as what we're looking at for the resolution. And the amendments to Title 21, we would look at amending the A1 district, the C3 district, the I1 light industrial district, and the definitions in regards to kennels. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt Roby, City Attorney.
Thank you, Brandy. So there was a subcommittee that was formed between members of the Plan Commission as well as members of the Animal Control Board, and I'll just try to rehash real quick here. You know, the Animal Control Board had were reviewing ordinances and discovered that there was this language in the planning ordinances, the zoning ordinances, regarding the number of animals, and long story short, the interpretation of the current language of the ordinance is that you can't own for personal use more than 2 dogs unless you have a conditional use and live in an egg zone. And so the Animal Control Board thought that that deserved some attention and possibly some fixing, and so we put together the subcommittee because the current regulation resided in the zoning ordinance, and what you have in front of you is kind of the result of the culmination of that subcommittee's work. There will be some changes made to the animal control ordinance at the same time, but essentially what it would do, it would remove that regulation on the number of dogs from the for personal use from the zoning ordinance. There would still be a commercial kennel land use that is now that is defined under the zoning ordinance and would be available as a conditional use in the Ag, C3, and I1 zones. And then the corresponding ordinance changes would have been approved by the Animal Control Board, and what they landed on there was a cap on the number of dogs at 5, no more than 5 for personal use in the city, and that would reside in the Animal Control Ordinance, and there would be no mechanism for appeal from that. It would just be that would be the cap. And I know that we've been through this a couple times before, so probably already talked too long. You probably already know all about this, so that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you for the recap, and yes, we have talked about this in previous meetings under discussion, so I will open the public hearing. There's a public hearing on this item. If there's anyone in the public to speak in favor or against this item, please do so. Or if there's any other comments from board members.
I'm going to make a comment. I was fortunate enough to be included in the discussion, and it was very good give and take on all sides of the issues. I think the Animal Control Board had brought some good things to light. We had a conflict in our ordinances between animal control and the zoning regulations. I think, we talked a little bit about, where should the number of dogs be at, and I think the Animal Control Board being the appropriate mechanism, because they look at the animal safety and health, welfare, those types of things, made the determination to go to 5. From a zoning perspective, the city has always looked at not having too many dogs on a person's property and not operating a commercial kennel within the residential zones. There is something, though, that we did talk about, and it's not included in this draft, and I will be making an amendment when we get to the discussion phase. But currently, dog houses, and I'm going to take dog houses and kennels, and I don't want to equivocate the two. But a kennel, we're looking at commercial zoning of commercial kennels being someplace where I'm harboring, boarding, raising, and then using it for monetary, compensation. Currently in the existing Animal Control Board regulations, it stipulates that the kennel, was what they called where the dogs lived, had to be at least 50 feet from a person's residence. That is being proposed to be removed from the Animal Control Board section of the city's ordinance. And I'm fine with that because I think sometimes it makes it difficult to cite. I'm gonna call it a doghouse, where with or without a run. It can be located on some people's properties because they have small lots. But what happens now with what's going on here, theoretically, I can own up to 5 dogs, and other sections of our existing ordinance allows accessory structures less than 120 square, or 200 square feet to be 4 feet off a person's property line. And because, 5 dogs in a kennel, not a kennel, but a doghouse, 4 feet off the property line with a 7-foot setback, that means now they're 11 feet away from your bedroom window, when before the rule was 50 feet away. So I am looking that I think a reasonable compromise in this situation would be that we treat all dog houses with or without a kennel to meet the minimum setback as required of the principal structure on the lot. So if I have a 7-foot side yard setback and or 7-foot rear yard, the doghouse, whether it's under 200 square feet or over 200 square feet, with or without a run, would need to be set back from that. So theoretically, I'm getting an extra 3 feet. I mean, I like dogs. It's not that I don't like dogs, but I just know if I have 5 dogs living in a kennel, if it's a garage is 7 feet away, at least there's insulation in that garage and there's insulation in my house. So it's somewhat muffled. 5 dogs, and we don't get into the whole idea of how big that dog kennel should be, but there are American kennel standards of how much they should be. But theoretically, I could take a 200 square foot shed that I buy at Menards, I could pack 5 dogs into it, and I could pop that 4 feet off the property line. That's what your ordinance would do with these amendments. And you say, Todd, that's crazy, but you know what? Somebody will do it. And somebody is going to get mad, and then there'll be arguments. And so 50 feet, I think, is too far. I think a reasonable setback would be whatever we're requiring for a principal use. I'm going to get off my soapbox. Matt heard this story way too many times over the course of, as did Liam over the last couple months.
So just real quick, and I think the board would have to make this motion, but I think Councilman Hoyer is on a time limit here. So if the board is interested, you could maybe table this, pick up the bar tavern, come back to this if the board is interested.
If there's no other discussion on this, I think we could settle this relatively fast.
Well, there is, because I have a problem with the number of dogs.
Okay,
so,
we'll come back
yep.
and we'll honor the. I'll make a motion to table.
Can I close the public hearing first?
No, I think we're going to
Okay,
come back to
okay.
it because there's still a thing going on.
Second.
I'll make a motion to table item D and return to item C on the agenda.
I've got
Second.
a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, let's go to item 6C, commission consideration of resolution, or 6D. No, 6C, commission consideration of resolution 2021-17.
The record should also reflect that Councilman Hoyer owes the board gift certificates to Watertown Brewing Company.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So this is an amendment to Chapter 2190 of the revised ordinances, and this would be amending the definition for bar or tavern. So this is a twofold ordinance amendment as well. We need to make amendments to Title 21, which the only thing here that we need to is the definition. And then also to Title 2. Again, that doesn't come to Plan Commission for recommendation. It just goes to City Council, but I'll explain, because they're related. So what we would be doing is changing the definition of bar or tavern to just say any establishment, including restaurants and gambling establishments, licensed to sell alcoholic beverages for consumption upon the premise where sold or provided. What it used to, or what it currently says, and what we're looking at amending, on striking this language is the term bar or tavern should also include establishments licensed to sell alcoholic beverages for consumption off the premise where sold. And so today, even if somebody is wanting to just sell off sale, they still come to the Board of Adjustment for a conditional use. That makes it, it doesn't meet the intent of what we're actually trying to look at as a board. So we would be looking at an actual bar or tavern. So to define it for what it is. And then in Title II, it would still be, because that's a state license, that it's an on-off sale license. That would have to be issued by City Council. But then we would add language into Title II, and I'll pull that up to give reference there if you give me one moment. So currently then, there are land use components in Title II, which is the Alcoholic Beverages Ordinance. And so here it says that if the premise are to be located in any of these districts, and we would actually be changing that at that time too, to just say residential district, as set forth in Title 21, then we have to look at the location and that it's so far away from these types of uses with a church, school, boys or girls club, whatnot. And then that, what we want to add is that they would also be required to get a zoning verification letter from the Community Development Division so that we are able to check each application for an on-off sale that they are not needing a conditional use. So the only thing that would be needing a conditional use would be an actual bar or tavern. Otherwise, the off-sale component can be handled as a retail establishment, which is a permitted use in many districts.
So basically what we're saying, for simple minds like mine, is that any property in a commercial, industrial, or agricultural zone, if they have any sort of retail nature, could get a off-sale license to sell alcohol. And if I want to sell on sale, I have to come to the board and get a conditional use permit.
Yes.
That's really it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that.
And just to clarify, as it sits today, they could still get the license. They would just have to come to the board to get the conditional use as well to sell off sale. That's just historically,
So,
not to confuse the issue again, but historically, the council has just never approved it for non-standalone locations.
and there's still nothing saying that the council would let Shopko, Shopko's a bad example, Target, if they wanted to sell on sale, they'd still have to come in. There's nothing beholding them, even if they meet the setback requirements within the ordinance, the council is still within their druthers to decide whether or not to approve it or not.
Yes.
Thank you for the introduction. I will open the public hearing. Is there someone here to speak?
I am here to speak. Thanks for your tabling. That was an excellent use, parliamentary style, for exactly what it's for. Pleasant to see in action. But I appreciate it, guys. So realistically, this was just something that growing up in Watertown, it's always been kind of a question mark, I guess. A lot of folks actually have just thought for years and years that this was a law, that you couldn't sell alcohol in a gas station or wherever, and it's not. You just needed a permit, basically, or a conditional use in this scenario. When I saw the bar tavern language on it, I just thought it didn't make a lot of sense because it isn't a bar or a tavern. And then if, per se, a liquor store wanted to start pouring beers, realistically, they can do that with their current use, which isn't the intent. So it's just a clarification more than anything, like Brandy said. And the hope is that this clarifies it a little bit. It differentiates between the two. For folks at home, you have that peace of mind still that even with the on-sale, off-sale, you do have the language that keeps it away from inappropriate areas. It is still reviewed. So you're not losing that policing aspect of it. There's still checks and balance to it. But it just treats the product as just that. It's just no different than going to grab a grocery and take it home.
Mr. Chair. Matt, when on an on-sale license, let's just take this the next step. Since there is no public hearing, is there a public hearing held and neighbors are invited if there was an off-sale license? when it comes to the city council, I mean, if, let's just take the gas station on Kemp across from the flower shop, or let's just take the flower shop, for example. If they wanted to start selling off-sale alcohol there, who gets notified on that?
It does require a public notice, and so it's a traditional.
But the public notice is a newspaper.
Yeah,
The
it's
adjoining
not-
properties don't get notified like they do under a CUP process.
Correct, just a public notice in the newspaper.
That's my question, thank you.
A public notice for a public hearing. Correct, yeah, there's a public hearing.
I would just add to that, that station already does do off-sale beer through the casino.
I know, I'm just trying to make the example that the difference, the way the process
Sure.
works today is that, and I'm not trying to be a prude, I'm just trying to, for the public's understanding, is that if I have a C3 property or a C1 property or a C2 property, and I want to sell off-sale alcohol today, I'd have to come to the board. All of the adjoining property owners, or even sometimes we take a look at going beyond that, if there's, daycares or whatever within 100 feet, whatever, get an actual notice or a letter in addition to the paper, which everybody doesn't read. And moving with this change, the only thing that would happen is there'd be a newspaper publication, and the adjoining landowners would not be notified until after the fact if they didn't read the paper. Correct?
And we would still
Yes, that would
be,
be correct.
we would still be looking at the location though of where it was going, if it was in a certain amount, if it was within so many feet of a daycare or the, Boys and Girls Club, things of that nature.
I know, and I know those things, but there's certain times some people don't want to live next door to it. Like, so for an example, this Planning Commission Board of Adjustment years ago on North 81, I can still see City Council member now Bueller voting against a potential on-off sale operation just north of where my office is right now. And then that was because the neighbors were notified, and the neighbors came to the meeting. They said, we don't want to have that kind of an operation next door to us because we are in a residential neighborhood, even though the property was commercial right next to it. And I'm not trying to argue against, I'm just saying there is going to be a notice requirement that's different than how things have been perceived today. And so it might be something that you as a city council member will see down the road that, why the hell did you issue that when, we're, 15 houses are within 100 feet of that, and we just don't want to see people coming in and out buying alcohol.
Yeah, and to put it in maybe an actual example, since they did request it publicly, if you change this definition, Menards will no longer receive notice via direct mail that Target is going to be selling, or is applying to sell off sale, essentially.
Public hearing is open. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment on this item?
I guess the last thing I would kind of say with this is just, and points 100% well received and understood, why we voiced that. In this scenario, even though you're getting that on sale, off sale, if they're not doing on sale, this is no different than going out to buy a pack of cigarettes. It's no different than getting milk at the grocery store. You're not going to drink it there. I don't think you're going to see a dedicated establishment to it, just because if you're just selling beer and wine, because this isn't liquor, it's just beer and wine. Good luck with that business model of just doing that. So I don't know that we'll see that so much. I think it just allows that if your normal citizen is at the grocery store, they can get their groceries and pick up a case of beer or whatever. Or if you're going out to the lake, you can stop at the gas station, fuel up your boat, pick up your bait, and also grab whatever beer you're going to get on the way instead of making it 2 stops and inconveniencing our citizens.
I'm trying to be arguing or a nervous Nelly on this, but I do also know that, you go to Sioux Falls, there's stories in the newspaper all the time when you're downtown Sioux Falls, right off, not in the McKinnon Park area, but you go up by the cathedral, the area there, there are gas stations that sell alcohol out of there, and they do have problems. There have been issues with vagrancy and those types of things. Yeah, I might not buy it there, but I could buy it there. I could walk a block away, or I can drink it. Technically, you're not supposed to be drinking it while you're walking down the street, but things like that can happen and do happen. And so I want to make sure that there's a real world picture of potential things that could come into play. Again, I'm going to vote for this in favor, but I just want to have full disclosure.
Thank you. Is there any other public comments? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion and a second from the board for further discussion.
So moved.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other further discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Going back to item 6D on the agenda is, was the tabled commission consideration of resolution 2021-18. Currently, do we need any motion to untable it?
Yeah, the motion to bring it back off the table. So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, it is off the table, so it's, we're back to just discussing it. The public hearing is open. I think we were about to discuss the number of animals. Go ahead.
Sorry, I agree 100% with Todd as far as the setbacks. I think that's a great catch. My only problem is the number of dogs. We have, people in the country that are living with windmills and hog confinement and cattle confinement, and we expect our citizens of Watertown to put up with 5, and not all dogs bark, but dogs bark. That's what they do. And they can also get to be pretty vicious looking, intimidating. When you come out in your backyard and you got 5 dogs charge your fence. If they have the fence, maybe they have the underground fence, which is even more unnerving. 5 dogs, in my opinion, in the city limits is just a lot to expect. And there's great owners and then there's not so great owners. It's a fine line to me to be able to ensure that I have quiet enjoyment of my property when I step out on my patio, or my children go out in the backyard and, the fence is 3 feet from 5 dogs jumping over and taking my child down. So that is my concern. 5 dogs is a lot of dogs. 5 dogs, little dogs, they like to yip, so they're just as annoying as big dogs. I just think the number is alarming.
There was a ton of discussion on the number, and I think one of the prevailing thoughts, maybe not the prevailing thought, was that the noise ordinance and the nuisance ordinance satisfied some of those issues. So it's going to be a reported issue regardless, right? If somebody's got more than 5 dogs, they're going to report it. I mean, the enforcement's going to be on a.
Do I want to report you, Liam, as a neighbor? I mean, I think it just alleviates the bad neighbor sense.
Sure, but it's the same. It's going to be on a reported basis for the number too, right? I mean,
if you have 5 dogs, your limit, you can have 5 dogs, but your 5 dogs bark and they intimidate me and my children to
sure,
enjoy.
But if we set the number at 3 and I have 4 dogs, that's going to be on a complaint basis too.
No. If you have 5 dogs, you can have 5 dogs, and they all bark every time I step out of my home.
I think what you're trying to say is that the propensity to have more problems is exacerbated by the more dogs that are on a piece of property.
Correct. And I'm not saying they're all that way. I mean, I just think that I think we owe it to our citizens that, I'm going to go buy this house and not knowing that there's 5 dogs next door. I close on the house and move in, and they open the door and 5 dogs come and stare at me and yip at me the entire time I'm in my backyard. What repercussions? I have nothing. I am now stuck with a house with 5 dogs next door to me.
Other than if they are creating a nuisance issue by odor, because they're not picking up after the dogs, or by noise, which I can't remember if we do have a noise ordinance that, and I think the arguments that you're making, I was a canary in the coal mine at the same time throughout the discussion, because again, it's not just the one neighbor. Theoretically, where I live, there are 4, but 2 in the backyard. I don't have a fence; it's not a fenced-in yard. 2 neighbors there could be 20 dogs within 75 feet of each other, right? And so we talked about that, and we also talked about that. Yes, I could turn my neighbor in, but lots of times people don't have the oomph to turn their neighbors in because I still got to live next door to them the next day. And so the question is that by going to 5 dogs, I'm 100% certain that there will be more police calls than
Exactly.
animal control calls than there are today, and there will be more neighborhood consternation between individuals. Our social fabric may be affected to a certain extent, but at the same point in time, I acquiesced in the conversation and said that let's run it at 5 and see what happens.
Why 5?
I don't know. I was still at the same numbers what we were before, but
I don't know why anybody should own 5 dogs, but I wasn't going to be the one to put the kibosh on that. And again, if we set the number at 2 dogs and someone goes and has 4 dogs, it's still a complaint basis. You see what I'm saying? You still have to complain on your neighbor.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's you end up in kind of this where the rule subsumes itself.
And what about the potential, like Todd mentioned, you got 5 dogs over here, I got 5 dogs there, and 5 dogs there, and they all decide that they don't like each other, and my child's out in the yard with a hot dog in his hand, and
sorry.
Holy cow. I think in a way we're setting ourselves up for, a catastrophe.
We did look at some of the ordinances and I think 5 dogs is on the high end when you compare us to other municipalities across the state of South Dakota. But it was the compromise that we came up with.
In the neighborhood that I live in, one time the dogs got into a fight and one died. That was awful, in front of the children. It was bad.
I remember that.
I think we're putting dogs ahead of our children. I don't think 5 dogs is in the. Again, are we a city, or are we trying to become a city, or are we trying to stay the backward hick little town that allows horses in the yard too?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Roby, go ahead.
So first of all, 4, 5, and 6 is a pretty common number around South Dakota. First of all, second of all, as we speak, the regulation.
That's not true. Aberdeen and Brookings have less numbers than that. Sioux Falls have less numbers than that.
Can I finish?
The number in Brookings is 3, and the number in
That's not
Aberdeen
true.
is 4.
No, there was
Brookings
one
was
that had
6.
6.
I just thought Brookings was 6, but maybe it wasn't.
It included dogs, cats, and other household animals.
And I was able to I can't remember which one, at least one city didn't have a cap.
Right. So anyway, the other thing was, as we speak today, this isn't being regulated. Can I? Is this a? Are you Mr. Robert's Rules here? So as we speak today, theoretically we have a cap at 3, but since I've been here, there's been 0 enforcement of that. 2 members of the committee have had 4, 5, or 6 dogs in this town that nobody knew about because they've been good dog owners. The people that are bad dog owners are going to be bad dog owners with 1 or 2. Typically, the people that are better dog owners are the ones that are interested in having more dogs. And so Dr. Reeb, who sees dogs on a daily basis, and he sees poor dog owners and not poor dog owners, people that have lots of dogs are people that are super into dogs and take really good care of their dogs and train their dogs, and hardly anybody knows they have 5 dogs. It's the people that have 1 or 2 dogs and this happened upon a dog that end up causing the most problems in their estimation. So the idea here was to set a number because currently it's this backdoor rule that you have to have a conditional use and live in an egg zone if you want to have 3 dogs. And so to set a hard number, we talked about 4, 5, and 6, and 3. There was not, actually 3 wasn't seriously considered because the members of the board were pretty adamant that that more than 3 should be allowed. If this board doesn't want to approve this ordinance change, then that other, that committee would have to get back together and have those discussions to reduce that number.
Thank you for that, Mr. Roby. And
Mr. Chair,
can I?
yeah.
Okay. I think the good point is made there that we don't currently have an ordinance, because right now it has to be in the egg zone or in the kennel. And I think this at least gets the ordinance on the book. And if 5 happens to be the wrong number, then we're back here making just a small change and we're changing 5 to 3. If it doesn't happen to be the wrong number, then we go on years without problems. So I think it is important that we try to get it right, but I think long term, it's okay if we get it on the books and we have to adjust something slightly, it'll be easier to do that in the future.
Two things, Mr. Chair, 2 things. Section 14-6 of the Brookings Code says that a kennel is no more than 4 animal units, just for the record. Number 2, we aren't making the determination on how many dogs are allowed. That's a separate ordinance done by the building code, by the Animal Control Board. If we want to stipulate how many dogs, and we want to be inconsistent, similar to the way it is right now, we would have to change. We wouldn't have a commercial kennel. We'd have to have a commercial kennel definition and then what I would call just a private kennel definition. And that's not what's before us at this point in time. So I think I agree with you, Mr. Chair, that if 5 isn't the right number, we find out about it. And if we have to use a zoning approach that becomes inconsistent with the Animal Control Board, the zoning rules, which are more restrictive, we would still honor the zoning rules over the Animal Control Boards when it comes to those things under our purview. So where I'm at with it is that I acquiesce and I'm fine with giving the 5 dogs a run at it. And if the world goes to hell in a handbasket, it'll, as you said, it'll come back to us, and then we would maybe have to look at something. The only thing that I'm most concerned about is having a separation distance for dog houses from people's houses. That's not 50 feet, but a reasonable number, i.e. the setback.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, who said that?
I want to clarify again. I'm looking at the Brookings ordinance right now, and it's 6.
Well, I'm just looking at the municipal code, and it says section 14-6.
14-6, that's what I'm looking at. It says
And it
6.
says a kennel is defined, I'm going to pull it right back up.
It doesn't matter. 6, okay, it's 6 or 4. Sioux Falls is 4. I'm looking at Sioux Falls, that's 4. So the discussion was around 4, 5, and 6. So it's not unreasonable. It's not like we're way out of the ballpark.
I just wanted to add as well, as far as if we would ever look at adding, regulating the number of pets in the zoning ordinance, I think that would be very inappropriate because it's land use. And so then, as Todd had stated, then what he's looking and would like to add to this ordinance amendment for Title 21 would be looking at the doghouse, not as an accessory structure, but as a standalone doghouse that we would most likely maybe need to define. It's pretty straightforward, but where we would place that is the next thing.
My thinking there is if we were just to say a doghouse is a structure where a dog is kenneled, period. And that a doghouse is an accessory structure to a primary residential structure. And that regardless of size, we have other areas that 200, and the section of the ordinance that says we don't have to honor setbacks under 200 square feet does not apply.
So when
And
we
it creates no more work for staff because we're not issuing building permits for anything under 200 square feet right now. And if I've got something bigger than 200 square feet, you do get a building permit for that. And so there's no additional workload to the staff. I think that's something that should be noted as well.
So I think that could be a really easy thing to potentially write into the ordinance. But I think it's going to be easier in the sense of having anything under the 200 square feet meet the accessory setbacks rather than the primary setbacks. That would be for ease of putting in there, for ease of interpretation. It's just we would regulate that as we would regulate anything else, and that's typically a 4-foot setback versus what a 9-foot setback on the side yard and a 25-foot setback in the rear yard. I'm not sure that captures what Mr. Kays was presenting, though. I think he's wanting to see these have a greater setback and be treated like a primary structure for setback purposes.
Thank you. I think that's exactly what I'm saying if I'm capturing your thoughts. I want to see a doghouse to be set back from a side yard the same distance I would see the primary structure, i.e. a house.
So when we took a stat, when knowing your thoughts, Todd, looking at the ordinance, I think the most appropriate place to put that would be in the supplemental provisions for allowable miscellaneous accessory structures. And similar to when we talk about decks, and let me just pull this up, I wanted to give you guys an idea of where it was. So if we added something as simple as dog houses shall observe the same setbacks as primary structures, see table 21, 1001.
Okay. So does that mean that the fence part of that, if they do have it, a dog fence around their dog house, is in that setback, or does it mean the structure?
I'm looking only at the dog house.
So I
being,
can run
being
my,
a structure where a dog is kenneled.
but I could run
That
my
doesn't
fence
mean-
right up to Bonnie's property
We've
then.
had this conversation that, yes, I could have my dog run loose in the backyard with the fence right on the property line. And again, I'm fine with that. I'm talking about the actual structure of the
I'm
dog.
saying if I have a doghouse with a run attached to it, Todd,
That's part would have to meet the setback.
that, the fence part would also.
Oh, see,
Yes, the run.
okay, yeah, and that could be added to the definition then, that it would be, a doghouse would include a run, but then at what point do you differentiate between a run and a fence?
The dog house is a structure where a dog is kenneled. If the dog has a enclosed structure where it sleeps at night and it walks, it's got a 10-foot run, the 10-foot run is part. If you want, we can put a picture in it, in the ordinance,
Yeah.
so that we can show what we mean. That's my
No,
intent.
and yeah, I did understand that, but I'm just saying the fence, so it's a structure. So the doghouse itself is the structure. The fence is the fence.
No. A dog, how I would see this happening is a dog house is defined as a structure with or without a dog run where a dog is kenneled. I think that very common, straightforward language, which means it is Snoopy's dog house with or without a cement run. And you measure the setback from whatever outside perimeter of that Snoopy's dog house with the outside run.
I wouldn't envision that it would be a cement run. And even though that's landscaping, so that doesn't require setbacks either, and fences don't either.
I'm saying that the perimeter of a dog house with or without a run is the structure.
Okay.
Because I do see where in people's backyards, they'll have a concrete, and then they'll have, and the fence, but then they'll have the dogs in, like you got the corner here, and then you'll have the other two sides with concrete in there, and it's like a chain link fence with no house right at the corner.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think about this for ease of administration and things of that nature. I mean, we could have that, but I'm also just kind of trying to think as a staff person. There are a lot of people that have like the doggy doors, and then the dog runs wherever in the fenced backyard, or have the dog out on a tie out. So I'm not sure. I mean, that could be helping a portion of the problem, but there also could be other problems, and I don't think that we're in a position to regulate like doggy doors or tie outs or things of that nature. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I'm only looking at the structure that is bigger or smaller than 200 square feet as an accessory structure to the principal structure, i.e. the house, where a dog lives and runs.
And I do see that point, Todd, because then you're not, and you're saying that if that dog is living full-time in that house, then they are setback, the primary structure setbacks, and so that you're not having a dog house that's where it's primarily housed, so close to
I don't
your
care if it's primarily
setbacks.
housed or if it's there for an hour during the day or 24 hours a day. I'm saying you have a structure. You require building permits for structures in this community. We're defining what that structure is. It's a doghouse with or without a run. There's a perimeter around that doghouse. From there, I need to get a building permit if it's bigger than 200 square feet. If it's smaller than 200 square feet, I don't need a building permit. But it needs to be set back an equal distance to whatever the setback is for the principal structure on the lot. That's all I'm asking for.
So, the only issue I would say, I mean, I don't think there's, from a staff level, as long as there's no permitting requirement and there's no upfront staff time, I think it's probably not a huge issue, but the only thing it will do is create a bunch of non-conforming structures.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, is so then if it goes in at this particular time, so then it's from this point forward, then we would have this regulation, and it would be essentially hard to really track because some of these folks are not knowing that they would need to get a permit, or sometimes they wouldn't need to get a permit, and I think it could be confusing. So we would have to look at like aerial photography to try to figure
There is a
out.
2012 land use survey that I did in the city that found every kennel that
Okay.
was on the ground. There's a GPS point in your database.
Okay, so we do have it from 2012 combined with aerial photography. So that's helpful to know that.
Any accessory structure, though, needs a permit.
Even if they're under 200 square feet?
It should, but there's also then, and there's a conflict in Chapter 5 that says any work that is under $1,000 or under $2,000 is exempt from a building permit. So,
We also have an existing section of code that's in the Animal Control Board that says all kennels have to be 50 feet. I'm going to tell you, nearly every kennel in the town under the current rule is non-conforming. And we've lived that way for at least the 30 years that I've been doing this job in the area. So I don't think the non-conformity aspect is a reason to deny something.
I think that, but any shed, I mean, any accessory structure, we differentiate them differently if it's above 200, or it's greater than 200 square feet or less than 200 square feet and their setbacks. And so just to be able to check that, we do require that permit for any structure.
so
my
really,
understanding.
essentially, it's acting as a zoning permit and not so much as a building permit per se, but they're getting a permit. They should be getting a permit. It's interesting because the Chapter 5 is going to exempt out things like siding and roofing and all of that type of activity, but then we would be adding that we would need to get a building permit essentially for a doghouse that would probably be valued at less than $2,000.
But that is entitled 21. I think what you're getting at, Stacy, this list here about the $2,000.
Oh yeah, that's in 21. Yes, excuse me, it is in 21.
And I think that there's somewhere as far as when your grant, we can look into that. But carry on.
With what Todd is saying, if we make that the ordinance and we do or do not go and enforce it, at least if I'm having trouble with my neighbor's 5 dogs, and I come down here and I say, okay, he's got his kennel right on the property line, I have grounds now to have code enforcer go down and say, you need to move your kennel because, for quiet enjoyment of Rhonda, you need to move your kennel. It's right here in the books. Whether that kennel had been there for 20 years or tomorrow. At least I have something to stand on to get the dogs away from the noise from my bedroom window.
Yeah, just to clarify, so that's the issue. If it's been there for 20 years and we pass it, it's grandfathered in. If it's a structure, it's grandfathered in. So that's the non-conforming issue that's creating. But again, to Todd's point, he's correct. There's a lot of places in town that there isn't 50 feet between houses and that do indeed have a dog kennel on one or the other of the houses, and in theory are violating that provision. So it is what it is.
If they didn't receive a permit, though, I just want to make this clear because I don't want the misconception being out there. This is in 210206, is that it shall be unlawful to proceed to construct, install, move, demolish, alter, or repair any building or structure, including manufactured homes, mobile homes, fences, unattached accessory garages, and storage sheds, decks, retaining walls, or other similar structures within the city without a permit issued upon application to the building official. And then that's when we look at the chart as far as if it's greater or less than 200 square feet and the setback requirements. But it's just because it's a structure, we need to see where that's being placed. And so if we would go back and you were having an issue with where your neighbor placed their doghouse, if they didn't get a permit, then it should not be grandfathered.
I thought we decided that kennels, at some point in this process, I thought I remember hearing that dog kennels do not need permits, period. I remember somebody saying that dog kennels currently do not need to get building permits.
It's underneath, that's like greenhouses. I'll go to it here.
Like that's, so we had that issue up in Washington Drive where we had an accessory shed and then another accessory shed that had a kennel on it. And we decided that because it's a kennel, even though it's like the size of a shed, it's okay because we don't regulate kennels currently. That was my understanding of the ordinance. But
And that was, I think, because he did not have an accessory structure. So he could have two accessory in that one section of the ordinance here, that you can have one accessory structure under 200 square feet and one over detached garage, depending on the size of the lot. But no, that wasn't my interpretation, I guess.
I'm not sure if we've ever really done permits for dog houses, to be honest. I have not heard of that. Technically, probably according to the very strictest interpretation of this ordinance, I would say it is required. Now that I look at it, but I'm not sure that we have really ever issued those. They have been more of a miscellaneous accessory type use. That would still be required to meet the setbacks, not of the primary structure as it's written today, but of the accessory structure, which under 200 square feet is the 4 foot from the side and the rear property line.
Right. And that is just the common perception, is that the community member would probably not think that if they bought this little doghouse that they wouldn't come in for a permit. But at least it gives the neighbors the assurances that there are actually, if there's an issue, if your neighbor places a shed, a 10 by 10 shed, anything like that, that if they didn't get a permit for it, then it's not complying to the setbacks already. They should have gotten a permit. So then at least it gives the neighbors some protection there. This is what and that's why we were thinking of adding it into this section of the ordinance. If we were going to, this would be the place to add it, because it talks about a permanent sports or recreational structure, facility, and greenhouses, swimming pools, barbecue pits, similar improvements. And then underneath of that is where we would add the dog houses shall observe the same setbacks as primary structures. And so if there ever was a huge issue, then this would actually be on the books. And they would need a permit for sure, but it might be placed out of conformance, and then that would just be the protection for the community.
So you would actually charge for the permit then?
$20.
Well, I guess it at least it safeguards, future trouble. If, like you said, there's probably people out there right now with 6 or 7 dogs that we don't know about, and no one's complained. But I guess I just hate to see us not be proactive instead of reactive. So
It's really the matter of if you think that it should have a doghouse, because most likely they're going to be under 200 square feet. It would be if you think that it should have greater setbacks than what are already on the books, is 4 feet off the side, 4 feet off the rear. And then, but what we would be changing it to would be the same as the primary would actually be. I honestly think, if anything, we should say that it would adhere to a structure greater than 200 square feet to be 9 and 9 off the side and the rear, because otherwise, if we go with a primary structure, then it's going to be 25 off the rear.
That's not my intent. I'm leaving that to you guys. I'm just saying that a rear yard is one thing. I think a side yard is where the potential for most problems are going to be, because homes are only 14, 16 feet apart. Mm-hmm. And that's where I can see potential problems. That's where I'm at.
And again, I don't think they put the dog kennel at the end of the yard necessarily. Sometimes it's just right outside the backside of the garage. So right next to my bedroom window.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that will help then. Basically, then all dog houses would be treated as a structure over 200 square feet.
I have a dog house less than 200 square feet. I can still pack 5 dogs into that house. So what I'm saying is every dog house, and with or without a run, has to be at least, the side yard setback has to match the principal structure. I'll go with that if we want to make it simple.
Okay, but it'd be the same, because it'd be the 9 foot. That would be the same as saying that it would be, the setbacks would need to match the accessory structures over 200 square feet.
Oh, I'm sorry, what you think? I thought you meant to say not applying to dog houses under 200 feet.
Yes, everything then. It wouldn't matter what size of a dog house you had.
My fault.
Okay.
I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think we're straight. Thank you.
So accessory structures can currently be less than is it 4 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If they're under 200 square feet.
Yes.
If they're over 200 square feet, then that's where we get the 9 foot off the side and the 9 foot off the rear. And if I'm understanding everything correctly, then the amendment that Mr. Kays is intending to bring forward would be treating any doghouse as an accessory structure over 200 feet for setback purposes.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And I'm actually changing that in the ordinance right now, and then I'll refer them to the chart in 21-1002 instead of 1. And so then that would be what, when Stacy and I were looking at this earlier, so we thought about just combining all of that A and B, what's currently in ordinance. So about the greenhouses and the permanent sports and recreational facilities and structures. And then we would just add B as a, we would add B as the dog houses shall observe the same setbacks as accessory structures greater than 200 square feet. See table 21-1002.
What if we said dog houses and any accompanying dog kennels?
Kennel out of the equation.
Okay,
That's where we
so-
had that. We had talked about calling a doghouse. A kennel, we're trying to just keep it as a commercial type of an operation, right, Matt?
So how would we then, without going to the definition section, dog enclosure? Okay. I guess that could be alternative wording.
I don't, you guys you like the idea of having the dog run included with the house? Because I think that seems like a fence or a patio situation. I think it should just be a structure, because that's not a structure.
My motion will be the entire structure.
So just to clarify though, that does not include an actual fence. So
I'm
dogs
going.
could run in an actual fence all day long right up to the property line, right?
No, I'm talking a structure where a dog resides. If we have to draw a picture of Stoopy's doghouse and a 6x10 run or whatever.
So
then
a
let's
dog
just-
run, a dog enclosure.
Yeah.
But again, it would not prevent somebody from having 5 dogs running right up to your property
No,
line all day
no,
long.
we had talked about that, and that was not my intent. I mean, I will acquiesce that will occur.
I will. I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion. I think Mr. Case is ready to make one.
Oh, I don't know. All right, go try it again. I move approval of Resolution 2021-18 with the following amendment. Staff can chime in at any point in time if I'm wrong. That we add a definition of a dog house, dog enclosure, whatever is more politically correct, which includes a structure where a dog lives, and that could be 1 hour, it could be 24 hours, I don't care. And that includes any kennel run with it. So I would recommend that, I know there's somebody that can make really neat pictures, they have the ability to do that, draw a dog house with a run, and that is what we mean by a dog enclosure. And that dog enclosure needs to abide by the setback requirements of any accessory structure over 200 square feet. Is that correct, Stacy?
Yes.
I believe that's my amendment.
And Brandy, can you just read that particular section back just to make sure that we get it into the right spot? So meet the setback requirement for accessory structures over 200 square feet in...
Section.
That is in chapter 21-1002 5B.
5B. Thank you.
But then we also, so we have to consolidate A and B as well. So Matt, is this too messy to add at this point? Do we have to bring it back?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
that it was noticed appropriately. I think that it was pretty broad language, and we used broad language.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that if it's approved at this meeting, it can go forward to the council.
Okay.
If, we could bring it back in old business to get your blessing beforehand, or shoot it around as a.
I'm comfortable giving it to staff. They know where I'm at, and if it's not written in the fashion that I like, I will be at the city council meeting.
And so then can you point out the other change, Brandy, that we were gonna combine a couple of things?
Yeah, so it'll just be consolidating A and B today, just because they are related anyway. We wouldn't have to do that. But we'll make sure that we add that language of the dog houses. Dog houses shall observe the same setbacks as accessory structures greater than 200 square feet. See table 21-1002. And then we will come up with a definition of doghouse.
Mr. Kays, would your motion include combining A and B or not?
I mean, we don't have to.
What do you mean by A?
We would just be proposing that really as, how about we just leave A and B and we'll just make a,
What do you guys mean by A and B?
right now, A and B underneath supplemental provisions for allowable miscellaneous accessory structures. It talks about the permanent sports or recreational structures or facilities such as tennis courts, swimming pools, barbecue pits, and similar improvements, provided a site plan for such facility is approved. And then same with non-commercial greenhouses, provided that greenhouses over 100 square feet in floor area must have an approved site plan. So instead of having that for greenhouses, we just added greenhouses up here.
I don't think you need a site plan for the doghouse run other than
No.
here's a square and it's 8 feet off the side yard. I think that's all that really needs to be part of the permit.
All we did, and I regret not tracking changes when I did this, because this would just now include non-commercial greenhouses would need a site plan for such facility. Doghouses will not.
No.
We have a motion. Do I have a
Second.
second? All right. Any further discussion?
I just want to say that I really appreciate staff and their dedication, particularly Attorney Roby.
Yes.
Did a really incredible job and tolerated
Yes.
lengthy discussions outside of this meeting.
I appreciate Matt.
And what we came up with
Completely.
looks pretty good. What he came up with looks really
Yes,
good.
it did. I mean, I had a bias. And
I
I
do-
thank you for entertaining it.
I just want to make one last comment, is that I am very hesitant about adding into the definition of doghouse that we would include the dog run, because I think that makes it very arbitrary of what is a fence and what is a what's a patio.
If you draw a picture and put it in the ordinance, that's what it is. Real simple.
I don't know how I draw that picture.
I'll have one of my staff do it for us.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Can I, so, I just want to know what section of the Brookings Code you're looking at.
Hey, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was looking at the definition and not the other section of it. But I do know that in Aberdeen, the dog
You're
number
right.
is 3.
Yeah,
Well,
you're
you-
right. Brookings is 6, though. Okay, just clear the air on that.
You are correct. And you're correct.
Aberdeen
and,
is 3, Brookings is 6.
And I will always defer to learned counsel.
All right, we don't
For
need to
the
see who's
record,
larger. Let's go on to
Roby
item
was
7.
right. Hayes was wrong.
Open public comment. Did we receive any?
No.
All right. Item 8 is new business, and I believe we have a marijuana ordinance discussion. All right, go ahead.
I guess I can tee it up, but I feel stupid doing it because Todd's kind of the guy that drafted this or helped play a large role in drafting this. It was distributed through the municipal league, but essentially what this ordinance will do is kind of give us a short-term fix that will allow us buy us a little bit of time to come up with our community plan for how we're going to tackle medical marijuana. More or less just says any application we get for a permit or license before the state promulgates their rules, which is the end of October. They have till the end of October to do so. Will be denied. It won't be pending. It'll be just denied, and that'll give us time now as a community to figure out exactly how we want to regulate this going forward. Todd, go ahead.
No, I think you covered it in a nutshell. Matt and myself, a gaggle of other attorneys, and some land use planners across the state sat down and looked at the issue that there isn't a community or county in the state that has any language in zoning or licensing that would have the ability to regulate the location of medical marijuana facilities. And under IM 26, the state, or not the state, but the drafters of that IM 26 did give local units of government the ability to regulate the time, place, and manner of those operations, with the exception of dispensaries. And a dispensary, every community in every county is going to have to allow at least one dispensary within their corporate boundaries. There are other types of medical marijuana facilities listed in IM 26. They deal with the cultivation of marijuana, the processing or the manufacturing of the product, and the testing. And theoretically, if a community wanted to ban all those 3 types of uses, we would have the ability. I think this was presented to the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance. Jack Heeb, Zach Peterson were the once-overs once Sam Drabilicock and I took a stab at this. And I think it's a very simple ordinance. And again, as Matt says, it buys us some time. I don't know how much time, but it's something that we need to wrap our heads around. I know that myself and several other planners and attorneys across the state are currently drafting licensing and zoning ordinances. We hope to have something vetted through our the city attorneys association with municipal league, hopefully vetted by July-ish, so that can come to cities and counties across the state so that they can determine how they may wish to choose to regulate medical marijuana. I just also want to make sure everybody understands, so this has nothing to do with the Supreme Court case that's going on right now, or recreational marijuana. If that decision was to drop in a certain way in the next 3 weeks to 6 months, we are nowhere ready for that as well. So I think this is a good primer for how we might want to be looking at that larger issue as well, if it's something that the city wants to regulate.
So the tentative plan for this, I guess we're going back and forth on some emails today, and we're bumping up against notice deadlines and that sort of thing. So there's basically 2 options. The way I have done the math is either one, we hold a joint meeting of the city council and the plan commission on June 7th. Basically, you folks would show up at the city council for a portion, maybe at the front end of the meeting, call a meeting, a joint meeting, and at that time, you guys could approve this ordinance and the council would have their first reading. The other option would be for the council just to have their first reading on June 7th, and then on June 10th at your meeting, you could have your bite at the apple, approve it at that meeting. So it's it's a little bit out of order the way we usually do things, but it's okay. And so essentially council first reading, plan commission approval, council second reading, June 21st, and then there's an emergency clause, so it goes into effect immediately upon publication. So it'll go into effect in June 26th, just in the nick of time. But that's the tentative plan. And then again, I think there's just a larger discussion to be had about what, and that's going to involve the planning side as well as the general licensing side, the council, plan commission, staff. We'll see how that kind of all transpires. It's kind of one of those things where we want to have as much input as possible, but on the flip side is obviously the more input and more hands in the kitchen, the harder it is to get something done in time. So I think there's going to be I'm sure there'll be a template that'll come out that'll bring us pretty far down the road as far as what we want to do, especially from a zoning perspective. I think the big question is going to be, in my opinion, if we want to limit the number of licenses, and if so, how many do we want to limit it to?
The other thing that we're going to be needing to talk about is just the question of cultivation. If we think cultivation isn't somebody in a greenhouse in the backyard raising a few plants of weed, right? It's going to be warehousing types of things. There's going to be huge fire code issues because of the amount of electricity and juice and that's going on and keeping those things at a certain constant temperature. I know we haven't talked directly with Chip, but I know Luke in our office has talked to Chip about that. I know the fire code people are talking about that. The whole other issue too is then it's the whole manufacturing and testing. If you drive through certain parts of Colorado, you'll know if you're driving by a manufacturing facility, and that becomes a question of how our existing manufactured parks, and that becomes a discussion with the Development Corporation and all those types of with Mark and his crew as well. So, and then there's the whole thing is we have to be careful when we're setting our density requirements, our setback and separation requirements, because especially when it comes to the dispensaries, we have to be careful not to have them excluded based on, I've been talking to small towns where they say, well, we're going to have a half-mile setback from churches. Well, the whole city's only 1 square mile. We basically have zoned out in that, and we're not allowed to do that. So.
We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, though, do we? I mean, you look at places like Boulder, Denver. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the manufacturing and stuff is relegated to the heavy industrial areas in Denver. Yeah. It was my recollection. Yeah. I never got to
tour them. Huh?
Yeah, no, but having actually lived in a city and having lived when the recreational took over, I mean, it was handled relatively smoothly. It seemed like
we've a group of us have been working on that template. We've been looking at Springs has been a pretty good model. And we've also taken some approaches of treating it something like an adult use where we have that sort of a zoning and or licensing mechanism. Some communities, Yankton, for example, aren't treating it as a zoning mechanism. They're going to be doing it solely from a licensing perspective with some pseudo zoning things intermittent. I'm more of a purist. I'd like to either see a separate zoning ordinance, separate or licensing component, or something combined within that to make that happen. But it's a heavy lift for us because even though we know it passed last November, I think we were hoping that there would be some guidance provided from the state, and that never came to fruition in the legislature.
Yeah, I mean, up until the last minute of the legislative session, there was some hope that there was going to be an agreement to delay the effective date, and then all of a sudden things just blew up and there wasn't. So here we are.
Well, although it's reactionary, I think we do have a good group of people that's working on it at the state level. I mean, practitioners anyway. And Matt's been very vocal in those conversations as well.
The one intriguing question that's been brought up a few times, and I'm not sure if our city would be interested or if any cities will, but whether or not a city can be the monopoly dispensary operator. And so far, the legal opinions seem to say no. You know, us as a home rule charter community, you know, do we have more wiggle room there? I don't know. But that's been one of the intriguing discussions that I've been a part of.
Are you talking about something like the small towns have the municipal liquor store?
Well, like
Something
Brookings.
like that? Yeah.
Brookings does too. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So
Okay.
Brookings owns the liquor license, and Brookings is the operator of the off-sale liquor store, and then they lease out the on-sale rights to the bars and restaurants. So currently, the legislation doesn't explicitly allow for that. It just it clearly contemplates a private operator applying for those state licenses, but doesn't say we can either.
Thing is that Yvonne Taylor with Municipal League has got a lot of good people in the room, a lot of attorneys that are viewing it, and it's pretty funny. I mean, you see that many attorneys in the room and they're not arguing with each other, so it's kind of an entertaining deal for a planner to watch.
The attorneys aren't arguing, but are you?
No, actually, I don't think so. I mean, I find myself and Sam talking more than the attorneys, and I don't know if that's a good thing or bad. But in the end, we acquiesce to them. So
I'm just kidding, Todd.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing this as an ordinance in front of us then. I think the going out of order and letting us, having the council do the first reading and then bringing it to us at our normal planning date probably makes the most sense, I think, for us, and then we'll go about it that way and get it on the books before July 1st.
What would it take to have something queued up for rec? I mean, obviously it's conjecture, but judging by the Supreme Court arguments, I mean, I would be ready to rock.
I think the biggest thing that we deal with there in the rec, I think it's really it's the public use component that's going to be there. It's the ownership of the marijuana plants and what we have to do to there's things in there that says, well, if the city is allowing for the sales, then you're not allowed to grow your own marijuana, and there's some different things in there. And I think whatever we're doing from the medical marijuana as far as the dispensaries and those types of things, I think is very similar. But I think there's other issues that the city's going to have to deal with as far as the usage component, I think, and where you can allow it to be used. And I mean, there is some guidance in Amendment A, but I think there is some room for.
If I recall, I haven't looked at it lately. I've been so focused on IM-26. But if the Supreme Court comes back in the next few weeks and decides that it can go forward, I would suspect that the legislature may just at that time call a special session and just repeal all of IM-26 because Amendment A allows for medicinal, and I think there's actually lengthier timelines in Amendment A to actually put rules in place. And so it may actually buy us time on medicinal as well if it goes into effect. But again, I haven't looked at it closely lately. So.
Oh, I just read our emails too, and yeah, I was off a meeting cycle. I was thinking June. So we'll go that route.
June.
Yeah, beginning of June.
Okay.
All right, well, yeah, thank you for that update, and yeah, we gotta get it done, so we will. Any other new business?
None that I have.
All right.
That I have. I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out this evening, and thank you to those of you that have done work on that ordinance. That does help the staff out a lot, and the commission as well. So thank you.
Yes, I echo that.
Do we have any old business?
Nope.
All right, any reason to go into executive session?
Nope.
All right, motion is, or we are adjourned.
All right. Thank